This time, I will call into session the regular meeting of the City of Titusville Board of Adjustments and Appeals for December 5th, 2024. At this time, I want to ask you to please rise as we pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Call to order, pledge allegiance. May we have roll call, please?
Chairman Taylor?
Here.
Vice Chairman Van Dieven? Here. Member Beckles? Here. Member Smith Rodriguez? Here. Member Wheelis?
Here.
Alternate Member Green?
Here. Very good. So we do have a full membership here tonight, and we have the honor tonight of welcoming a new member to our illustrious little crowd. So, Counselor?
Yes, I'd like to invite Ms. Karshanda Wright to the podium for her swearing in.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Karshanda Wright. I live on Park Avenue, Titusville, Florida, 32780.
Ms. Wright, please raise your right hand and place your left on the Bible and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Karshanda Wright,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support,
to support,
protect, and defend
protect, and defend
the
the
Constitution
Constitution
and government
and government
of the United States
of the United States
and state of Florida
and state of Florida
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
domestic or foreign,
domestic or foreign,
and that I will bear
and that I will bear
true faith,
true faith,
loyalty, and allegiance
loyalty, and allegiance
to the same, and that I am entitled
that I am entitled
to hold office
to hold office
under the Constitution,
under the Constitution,
that I will faithfully perform
that I will faithfully perform
all of the duties
of the office
of the Board of Adjustments
of
and
the
Appeals
Board of Adjustments and Appeals
of the City of
of
Titusville,
the City of Titusville,
on which I am about to enter.
and which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and thank you. Normally, I would ask you to take your seat, but we do have a full quorum, and as an alternate, you are welcome to take a seat in the audience and observe the meeting for this evening. Thank you all very much.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here. We won't have to run any short meetings.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. All right. Okay. Next up on the agenda, approval of the minutes for October 23rd, 2024. Were there any modifications or corrections that anyone noticed they wish to change on the minutes that were printed? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Good. All right. All right. At this time, any person who decides to, no, wait a minute. They've changed the things up. You changed up my speech. It's short. Well,
Skip down to notice.
oh, there we go. Skip down to notice. There we go. All right. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards will be located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with procedures adopted in Resolution number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first. Those opposed will be heard second, and those who oppose will be, I messed that all up. Those in favor of the request will be heard first. Those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative for either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted to the evidence and be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. Applicants for land use and zoning related items will be advised that the clerk resumes? That the clerk, resume?
Advise the resumes of staff members.
Okay. Who prepare applications, applicable staff reports are on file with the city clerk's office. Tongue-tied tonight, sorry about that. Okay, so everyone that is speaking tonight has had a chance to fill out a card, whether you be an applicant or member of the public. Staff, the agenda items on tonight's program have been properly advertised?
Yes, all items have been properly advertised.
Okay. Have any of the members visited with any of the sites or spoken to members of the public regarding an item for review today?
No.
All right, thank you. Moving on past consent, we get to old business. So we're going back and bringing up variance number 21-2024, which is going to be a motion to clarify what was previously discussed at our last meeting. And that is the reason we have an alternate back up here with us tonight at this time, because he was at our last meeting. So you will have the same five of us that were here on the last meeting. So staff, would you please clarify for us what we're clarifying?
Just a reminder, the agenda item is not a public hearing. It's basically just staff asking for clarification on your action. So just to remind you, the application is, or this topic is based on an application that was at your last meeting in October, specifically requesting in variance number 21-24 for property located at 355 South Washington Avenue. Consider the requested variance to the land development regulations, section 34-128, subparagraphs A1A, to allow the qualification of a non-residential minor division without meeting the condition that the water, sewer, and reuse be provided by the addition of a service lateral only for each lot being proposed, no main extension required, for property located in the urban village zoning district at said location. So that was the initial request. On your agenda, you will see I'm going to kind of switch back and forth. You'll see on your agenda, pages 11 of your package is the development order. We drafted this development order, because we typically do this after every action, and signed by the chair and issued to the applicant, giving the applicant a final report or letter stating this is your final action and what happened at the board. This is unsigned because when we brought this to the chair, there was some discussion as to what was really stated. We looked back at the minutes and watched the meeting again, and we have some questions of our own. So you'll see there what we drafted in the development order. I'll just state here, qualification for this minor division is subject to the city receiving all necessary easements, which are proposed to provide utility access to the proposed utility mains on the approved site plan in a form acceptable to the city. Easements shall be subject to amendments for consistency with as-built construction. Purpose of that is we have to have easements over especially utilities that are going to be dedicated to the city, and that's specifically to a water main that is proposed as part of this development. Second, in the event that the code requirements of section 34-128-1A1A are not met within 6 months from the date of this order, then the property owner shall be required to record a lot merger of all separated lots that are created by the minor division of this parcel. As you can imagine, that's very difficult to try to apply afterwards if they don't adhere to this condition. So with that, we had some discussion of what happened, and we drafted a letter which is on page 10 of your packet. And this was drafted by Ashley Smith with Public Works. She's here as well to help explain this, but I'm just going to summarize quickly what's here. And these are the main issues that we'd like to ask you to help us clarify as far as your motion that was done at the last meeting. In the variance application, the applicant's request was to allow 6 months for all utilities to be installed from the date of the 5-parcel separation. The condition listed for the development order reflected the motion amendment such that the 6 months is from the date of the order. Staff is seeking clarification on which date to use to measure the 6 months from time frame. The second issue, in the variance application, the applicant's request is to allow 6 months for the utilities to be installed from the 5-parcel separation. Staff is seeking clarification for that utilities means both water and sewer. The third issue, in the variance application, the applicant's request for the said section is to allow for a period of 6 months to provide the utilities for all 5 parcels. Staff seeks clarification that the utilities shall be constructed for all main extensions for all 5 lots to be installed within that 6-month time frame. And if you saw the application, you saw the plan, it's a pretty significant project. And from our point of view, that's a pretty tall order to do in 6 months. If the desire is to follow the applicant's desire, staff would like clarification of what, if any, portion of the property is excluded from the variance request. Parcel 3 would not meet section 34-128A1A as there are proposed water and sewer extensions proposed as phase 2 utility plan. Ashley does have exhibits here to help illustrate that point. Final issue, in the draft development order, the condition for approval includes all necessary easements based on the approved site plan. The applicant has indicated providing only a portion of the required easements. Staff is seeking clarification if the easements are to be for the whole site plan, for all parcels created, or only for phase 1. So these are things we didn't get clarification on based on your motion and your discussion. We did include the minutes from your meeting, which begins on page 13. I do want to point to you to page 14. You'll see the beginning of the motion that you made. And right there at the middle there, you'll see Member Green made a motion to approve the variance to allow the qualification of non-residential minor division without meeting the condition that the water, sewer, and reuse be provided by the addition of a service lateral only for each lot being proposed, no main extension for property located in urban village. That's a word for word from the code. Then there was discussion about that motion. And then we didn't get to page 15 here after some discussion. This is just a summary of your discussion where Member Smith Rodriguez seconded that motion. And then there was further discussion about that particular motion. And then there was a vote. What we added on page 17 of your packet, there was about 10 minutes of your discussion we thought was the core part of that was the most important part of the meeting. And we asked the clerk to do a verbatim record of that time frame. So I don't know if you had a chance to go through to see exactly word for word what everyone said, but that's what we tried to convey to you so you can help you read what was said at that meeting and help us understand what your intention was as far as the motion and your approval of this variance. With that, we'll try and answer any questions you have. I don't know if Ashley, if you have anything you want to add.
Sure. If the board would like, we can kind of tackle each of the clarifications. And like Brad mentioned, I brought some exhibits which are just from the agenda last time, but so you could have them in front of you for us to discuss those clarifications. I thought that might be helpful. Okay.
One last thing, if you do need to see what was considered at your last meeting, we did include last month's agenda in Agenda Star. If you remember, you can just minimize your desktop or the agenda that's on your desktop, and you'll see that icon, that yellow star. Double click on that, and you'll see the last month's agenda in there if you'd like to see that as well.
Okay. If the board is okay, I'd like to do some of the clarifications out of the order that's on the letter. I thought it might be better to start with number 3, and then the other ones I think are a little bit more straightforward. So I gave you 3 papers, and in the top left corner, I put 1, 2, 3. And like I said, these were from the agenda last time, and I just marked up pages 2 and 3 to help the discussion of the third clarification. So after the meeting, I believe the applicant's intent is to only do phase 1 utilities, which wasn't, I felt like, properly part of the motion. And so you'll see the 5 parcels on the first page. And then on page 2 and 3, the second one is highlighting a portion with a red outline, which is to point out the sewer that the applicant intends to have in phase 2, which overlaps parcel 5. And so the intent by the applicant is not to install that section of sewer, that would be in the phase 2. So that's part of the clarification to ask is that the board's motion to allow the phasing of the utilities and to exclude this portion of sewer. And then on page 3, I apologize for it being light pink. I was limited on colors, but there's a light pink outline showing the portion of the water main that's in the phase 2 of the utilities, also in over parcel 5, which the applicant's intent is not to install that portion. So those 2 highlighted areas, it's to clarify, is the motion to allow the 5 parcels to be separated with those utilities missing or those utilities included. And what I will add for the applicant is that right now, if you go out to the site, there's a partial existing building. These utilities are proposed underneath where that building is today. So that's part of the issue.
I thought, trying to recall, and I pulled up the last agenda then. I thought that the testimony from the applicant was that all of the pipes were sitting there, ready to go. And I also thought that I saw a picture that had a loop system. That was the end goal, was going to be this loop system. Are those 2 things accurate from my recollection?
Yes.
Are we still listening, or are we supposed to discuss each one?
Oh, I can move to the others. I didn't know if it would be easier to
Oh, okay.
decide each one. I'm happy to go into the others. Or if you need me to add more context for this specific clarification.
You're on the third point on that letter,
The
correct?
third bullet in that letter is
That's page
10.
10.
I'll tell you what I recall thinking, just to start the discussion. I recall thinking that all the pipes were already there and they needed to be put in the ground, but there was loans that needed to be, construction loans that needed to be acquired, which means the separation had to happen, which was gonna delay everything else. I remember thinking all that. But then I remember thinking, since everything was there, with a 6-month leeway, money would be acquired, pipes would go in, this whole loop would be created for the entire project, is my recollection. And I distinctly remember saying 6 months, and the answer was yes, and I reread it in the minutes, including the verbatim portion of it, because I remember thinking that the applicant had said at the very last second, 9 months would be nice, and I confirmed 6 months. And I specifically said from the date of this order, which is my habit because that's what I do in my real life job. That's my recollection, if that starts discussion with anybody.
I can see where staff might have been confused because on this original drawing, it says phase, 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 phase all over the place. And we were looking at it as phase 1 and phase 2. and there was not clarification to the staff that it's like the second page 2 of 3. There's the phase 1 and phase 2. And that might have drawn some of the confusion because one page says one thing and what we were saying or what we saw and so we were saying something different. So thank you for these correction of phases. Everybody agrees. I mean, does this not look like what we talked about, phase 1 and phase 2?
Yes, I'll confirm. The exhibits are from the last meeting. They were included in that agenda. The only thing that wasn't was my markups that I put on there to just help point those out.
Correct. Okay. Within that same bullet then, the 6-month time period. There has been some discussion about changing that to another feature. Is that not correct?
Yes, the applicant has voiced a desire for additional time, and I think in the last, it was 9 months, but I think as just a recommendation for the board to consider that it might be worth tying it to the site plan instead, so that it might be more feasible to reach that goal.
And
The expiration date of the site plan being the expiration date of the time frame rather than giving it a set period of time of 6 months is what she meant.
It would actually give significantly more time.
How
And
much more?
it could be, that's a hard question to answer. Right now, I think the site plan has a year left.
Approved site plans have a 2-year expiration, but the way it works is that gives you time in order to get your permit and start construction. And then as there's bona fide work going on and other permits are associated with it, all that gets extended. So as long as work is happening, that site plan is still good. It's when everything stops, then time starts ticking, and then that expires if they're not doing anything. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, so if I'm hearing you correctly, everyone correctly, then it sounds like if we were here just to literally clarify what was said and what our intention was, it would be 6 months from the date of the signed order, whole project loop. But what I'm hearing staff and city engineer saying, extend that, which would make seemingly everyone happier by tying it to the site plan, which could be definitely more, at no less than 6 months. Would no less than 6 months be a fair statement?
It would be at least 8 months because of the site plan expiration date being 8 months or 10 months from now, right? That's what she's asking.
I still understand, because the site, what was approved last time was to say you got to install 6 months from the date this order's signed.
Right.
And that's
Which is
arbitrary.
what I think it should be. Because
Well,
that's what was
it's,
said.
it's an arbitrary time that was suggested by the applicant. As
Right.
far as what was reasonable to be able to impose as far as interpretation of motion, is just that they'd have to install this, which they currently have to do with an approved site plan anyway.
Right.
So this extra time frame is arbitrary. We have a process right now for an expiration with the site plan already. So the 6 months is not something that's necessary, as from our point of view.
Then what are we here for?
Well, the issue that we have is not only this time frame that's been imposed, but also this, what is going in with what? So there's some confusion as to whether it's supposed to be for one parcel, one phase. Is it just for water? Is it just for all the utilities? It's almost impossible to put in just water and not put in sewer at the same time with it. So there's a lot of misunderstanding or confusion from our point of view as to what the board understood what was presented to them and what they actually approved.
The minutes clearly indicate the phrase water and sewage in multiple sections, so I'm not really sure what the confusion is. It said 6 months from the date of the order, water and sewage in a loop, all the phases combined. I mean, am I the only one who thinks that? If I'm the only one who thinks that, I will shut my mouth and I will take a back seat. But reading the minutes and recalling from the hearing myself, that's my understanding. I'm happy to change it, to tie it with the site plan, because that sounds like it'd be more beneficial to the applicant. And so if staff is willing to be more beneficial to the applicant, I'm not gonna stand in the way of that. But if we're here on strict clarification, then I think that's that.
Well, I had a problem when I saw the word all utilities. I did not understand. In my world, all utilities means telephones, it means cable, it means electrical, because I'm in real estate. But after meeting with staff, I understand now it only concerns water, sewer, and possible reuse if reuse is available. That is what the staff considers as utilities. So that was some misunderstanding on my part. That was one of the reasons I didn't sign this development earlier, because I saw the word all utilities, and I didn't understand that function until I had a meeting with the counselor. So that is where some of the confusion came in, and I'll lay the blame on that for not understanding what the city's understanding of all utilities was. Any else questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I'm understanding is that with more time, as long as there's progress, that sewer and water will be built. And if there's a lapse in progress, then that's when you come in and shut down everything.
It was true of any site plan. If there's no work going on, eventually it will expire, and they have to bring things back into conformance.
And we are talking about sewer and water, because I'm looking at page 2 of 3 of the site plan of this, and it looks like it says sewer not to be built. I wonder what that means.
So I have page 2 and page 3 are the same exact drawing. They show both water and sewer on there, but I find that it's kind of confusing to see the different lines. So I just marked one so you could see the highlighted sewer, and then on the other to highlight just that small section of water. Because I think what happened is the applicant might not have fully clarified his desire. His intent, I think, was only to do phase 1 utilities. I do think Member Smith Rodriguez is right with what the board discussed, but I think the applicant didn't make that clear, and that's why these clarifications came up after the fact with discussions with the applicant and what they thought was being approved.
Thank you.
Has the city and the applicant and/or council got together on these clarifications for any discussion and reached any sort of potential agreement on it?
So I believe what we've presented tonight does represent what the applicant wants to install for water and sewer. And then the discussion of the time too is brought up because, as you can imagine, a project of this size does take significant time. And I think the board very much didn't want to hold up this site. So I think it's presenting a more realistic time to get it done. There's factors that are outside of everyone's control. For example, the project includes a lift station for the sewer, and that has to have power, which is subject to the availability of FPL. None of us can control FPL's timeframe. So I think tying it with the site plan, it prevents us from running into that roadblock. I don't think anyone wanted to come 6 months and we're enforcing this to stop necessarily.
Can Ms. Anderson approach the podium and confirm? Any objection to tying the timeframe to the site plan?
No, as you stated, that would be a more beneficial timeline for the applicant, for my client. So no objection there. And if we're discussing the phasing now or wait on that,
Hold on.
sounds good.
I didn't want to open a can of worms. I just want to make sure there's no objection.
Yeah, no objection to the timing, no. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so no objection to having it changed as far as the timeline to the site plan, to changing it from the time specific to the site plan as long as work is going on. All right, so now the other issue.
What, it sounds like what council is going to bring up in a minute then. So my understanding of what we're now accepting is that the entire, both phases, water and sewage and reuse, to be done in a timeline according to the site plan? Or are you talking about phase one?
I believe the applicant still would like to do the utilities in phase, and Brad can explain
Is the city fine
phasing
with
with
that?
site plan, because that can change. There would be a subsequent site plan for phase 2 potentially.
Yeah, so there is a site plan governing the entire property that includes a phase for another site plan to be added. But that means because the original site plan was approved with that phase, they have a certain amount of time. That phase something has to be submitted for it within the same time frame of the original approval of that site plan. That's how this phase is gonna work. So
so
they
the
have to
city's okay
continue
with it?
working. Sorry?
So the city is okay with water and sewage and reuse for all of phase one in accordance to phase one site plan?
Yes, the way that the utility phase plan is, we could support that decision
Okay.
if that's what the board wants. The only exception that should be made clear is that section of the code says that all parcels will have this necessary infrastructure. The reason why I point out the portions that aren't being installed, that means parcel 5 does not have all the necessary infrastructure. So that would be a decision the board has to make. Can you phase the utilities? Yes. I can say, yes, you can phase the utilities how they have laid out. But that section of the code requires all of it. So the board would have to make that clarification of allowing parcel 5 not to have all of those utilities or not. That's
Basically making a further exemption for those utilities for that specific parcel.
Instead of coming back to us.
Which the city is fine with.
we could support that decision
They
if
can
the
support
board
it.
makes that decision.
Okay. Can I invite Ms. Anderson back up to
Yes,
confirm
please,
that?
Ms. Anderson, again. And just for the record, your name and address for the record.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Chelsea Anderson, Mangrove Title and Legal, 1530 US Highway 1, Rockledge.
You good with that?
So yes, I think that is the confusion or the issue that we had after we came here and we went to staff, we're trying to get these easements done. So I did, you guys have this in your packet, and Ashley did highlight portions of the pink section that will not be built, they cannot be built within 6 months because there is a mall sitting on top of them. So the idea was the phase 1 infrastructure could be done within the timeline. The phase 2 infrastructure, that would be, in the future, we will have to submit a new site plan dealing with phase 2. There is a portion of the infrastructure, this purple, it does go through, and we would have to put an easement there, in order to satisfy the conditions of the approval from you guys. And we're willing to put easements in, but the actual physical construction of those water and sewer infrastructure would not be within 1 year. It would be more, once we start on the phase 2 work. I will point out the lift station is wholly contained in phase 1. So that would be built, and phase 2 is going to hook into that lift station. And then as far as the water, it does have water service right now. Again, this isn't like in a green field. The mall that's there is hooked up to water, and, there are tenants in there.
All right, that answers that for now, so thank
Okay.
you for that.
No problem.
Can I make one clarification with the applicant, if that's okay?
Yeah?
On sheet 3, just thinking of water only.
Yes.
The purple that goes through parcel 5, the purple is phase 1, that connection will be made, correct? Just
Yeah.
the bottom little L piece will not.
Right, we're constructing this in phase 1.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's being constructed. And I think the issue is the parcel 5, as you guys are calling it, the phase 2 parcel, it's kind of a byproduct of splitting the other 4, is because it's a remainder parcel. I know we're not in phase 2 yet, but in order to split the other ones, the result will be that there is this 5th parcel created.
So just for the board's sake, that dark purple will be installed, And the reason why I asked that, that is a key component to make sure there's enough water for fire protection. So, but the very pale pink circled area that I had, just this bottom little L piece is what we're talking about for the water that won't be installed. Okay.
And just to clarify, to make sure you understand, that's through parcel 5, phase 2. Okay, all right.
Does anyone else have any questions of staff or the applicant?
Did you want me to hit the other clarifications? We, to 100% confirm, the easement, that was the only last part. Ms. Anderson talked on it. So the clarification there is if we're asking for the easement over just the phase 1 water main or all of the water main, that's the last one there.
So the city would like an easement on anything
Phase 1 is
being
all
built for the water? The city would like an easement for whatever part of the water, sewer, and reuse is gonna be built initially.
So personally, I don't see a problem with providing the water or the easement for all of the water because right now we're talking about getting an easement before anything's built in the first place. It's just part of it will go over an existing building, but it's an easement. I don't know that that's a problem or not unless the applicant feels otherwise.
No, I mean, it's odd, but we can work with language that's acceptable to the city to indicate that it's for future construction of the utilities, so that at least the easement rights are there and in place, but they won't be, like, nobody can come out, the city can't come out and start digging up in the middle of the mall until we're starting to go into phase 2 construction. If that's acceptable.
What about if the easement is provided to us as draft form, it's not recorded, so because it's not, nothing there to accept yet until everything's constructed?
Like an escrow.
Do that instead of getting the easement? Is that what
Just
you're
not, it
asking?
can be an unrecorded easement against the title of the property.
I
We're
would be
good with
fine with that.
Okay.
And that would just be for the phase 2 easement.
Yeah, that would just be the portion like where the building is. The remainder could be executed.
Okay, we'll have to
Correct.
discuss the number of easements after because.
Or are you saying the whole
So
easement's
the way
unrecorded?
we accept, so we're talking about the water lines, that there's supposed to be an easement for that, for us to receive it and maintain it. And that typically doesn't happen until after the site plan is completed and they've got the infrastructure there. They record that easement, they provide it to us, and then we formally accept it. We accept responsibility. It's given to us now. But I think with any of the easements that we're requiring, we could probably ask for a draft that we can hold in escrow. And if it needs to be amended later on through construction, because some things change sometimes during that process, we can certainly do that.
I would not object to that. And then just for the record, the easement is 20 feet in width.
Okay, acknowledged, Ms. Anderson? Acknowledged, 20 feet in width?
Acknowledged, yeah, 20 feet in width from the center line of the main on the proposed pipe on the site plan, as located on the site plan, yes.
So do we have a suggested?
So it sounds like this motion for clarification is really a negotiation between applicant's counsel and the city, and the board actually doesn't need to do anything. You all are now agreeing
You
to a
need
new
to make a
draft.
motion.
To adopt the agreement of the parties.
I think the end of the last meeting, the board very much wanted to support the applicant. So I think that's why we saw that what the applicant desired and what was approved was in conflict, and that's why we bring it before the board. It's ultimately the board's decision, and I can just clarify if staff can, what we can and can't accept for decisions.
I don't think the board wanted to stand in the way of anything. I mean, if you all had an agreement, you probably could have just started this meeting by saying, we've spoken, we agree on these three things. Is the board good to accept it? I mean, I have no objection to anything I heard today.
Well, we still needed an executed development order too. So
We're on it.
the other issue too is that this is a very unique variance because this is a request to vary a process, basically. And that has created a lot of confusion for us because now we have an exception to what is required in the code, basically. And that has led to a lot of other questions as far as how do we apply our current standard process as far as the site plan. I think we've concluded now with your concurrence as far as what you heard and to last meeting and the motion you made is that the easement that would be necessary for us will be for the entire utility that is supposed to be dedicated to the city and not any portion of the property. In other words, not particular phase. They're supposed to, what they're going to construct and dedicate to the city is going to have an easement dedicated to us for that entire length.
But unrecorded and held like as escrow instead
Correct.
of executed.
And we just need confirmation that you agree with that as far as the motion that you approved last month.
As well as changing the timeline to, instead of the 6 months, to be from the expiration of the site plan for the project.
I agree.
All right, you made the motion. Do you approve of these?
It has gone off the rails here.
Potentially adopt all agreements and statements.
Well, I do.
All right, well, say that. Say that out loud. You accept?
I accept
Okay.
the negotiated settlement between applicant and the city of Titusville. That is the motion.
You made the second. Does your,
Yes, it holds.
the
Second holds.
second does hold. All right. Any other discussion?
All right, so we're going to summarize real quick.
Yes, all right. here we
I'm
go.
happy to do that. Okay, this time I will go in order of the clarifications. So for clarification number one, it will not be 6 months. We will tie this to the site plan timeframe.
Good.
For clarification number two, we've clarified it is for water and sewer. For clarification number three, we've clarified that this is for the phase one utilities, knowing that a portion of the utilities will not be built and will be in phase two, which will be sometime in the future. And then for number four, we will accept easements for all of the water main, but they will be unrecorded and held in like escrow.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Is there any questions? All right. So we had a motion, we had a second. May we have roll call from that, please?
Chairman Taylor?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Van Deven?
Yes.
Member Smith Rodriguez?
Yes.
Member Wheelis?
Yes.
Alternate Member Green?
Yes.
Congratulations. Clearer than
We
mud.
sincerely thank you all for your time. Thanks.
I'm so happy that everybody got together and talked, and we didn't have to fight it out. It was done for us. At this time, we've enjoyed you being here, Mr. Green. Appreciate it.
Dismissed.
You're being dismissed, and we're going to bring regular member Beckles up to replace you. I hope you stay the rest of the meeting, though.
Oh, I will.
Okay. All right. Well, that was clear as mud, but, okay. Okay, so, thank you very much for your indulgence. We will now move from the old business to new business. And our first item up is variance number 22-2024. Your microphone, please. Sorry? Thank you. I wasn't on? You're good. Wasn't on, okay. Our first item will be variance 22-2024 for 1018 and 1020 Orange Street. So, staff, would you enlighten us, please?
Good evening, board members. So variance request 22-2024 for 1018 Orange Street and 1020 Orange Street. The applicant is requesting a variance to the Land Development Regulations, Chapter 21, Section 21-317C, to allow a rear yard setback of 0 feet for a primary structure instead of the minimum required of 20 feet plus 1 foot for each foot of building height over 35 feet for properties located in the light industrial and warehousing M1 zoning district at 1018 Orange Street and 1020 Orange Street as submitted by Bruce Moya and MBV Engineering, registered agent for Michael and Rosa Grau owners. So as the first variance of the night for new business, the powers of the BAA. LDR Section 34-226 states that the board shall grant a variance request when in the opinion of the Board of Adjustments and Appeals, owing to special conditions, the literal enforcement of such ordinance or regulations would do manifest injustice to or impose an unnecessary hardship upon the applicant. In order to authorize any variance to the provisions of such ordinance, the board must consider the following criteria. A, special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved which are not applicable to other land, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district. B, special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. C, granting the variance requested will not confer upon the applicant any special privilege that is denied by ordinance to other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district. D, the literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district under the terms of the ordinance. E, granting the variance is the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. F, granting the variance will preserve the spirit of the ordinance and remain in harmony with its general purpose and intent. G, in granting the variance, the public safety and welfare must be assured. And in H, in no case shall granting of a variance result in a change of use not be permitted in that zone. So to the analysis, the applicant is requesting a variance to Land Development Regulations, Section 28-317, to allow the rear yard setback of 0 feet for a primary structure instead of the required minimum of 20 feet. The subject parcel is approximately 0.33 acres with an existing 8,308 square foot building constructed in 1966. Records from 1965 for 1019 Garden Street show that the property was once under common ownership and the building was constructed as one structure with 1019 Garden Street. It appears the building became non-conforming when the property was divided into 2 separate parcels. The applicant is requesting to bring the structure into conformity. The applicant's variance justification states that the existing encroachment is a nonconformity. According to Chapter 37 of the city's Land Development Regulations, a nonconforming structure is a structure that complied with zoning and development regulations at the time it was built, but which, because of subsequent changes to the zoning and/or development regulations, no longer fully complies with those regulations. When development is in place and the provisions of the zoning regulations render a site design feature out of compliance with current standards, the feature then becomes a nonconformity if it was in compliance when it was first established. The city therefore will recognize the nonconformity with legal status to continue, but with limitations. The nonconformity cannot expand or be rebuilt under the certain circumstances. Nonconformities often undermine what a community is seeking to achieve when it establishes allowable development standards for a zoning district. It is important to determine the best way to eliminate, reduce, or continue nonconforming situations. Section 34-344 of the Code states, nonconforming structures that were otherwise lawful on the effective date of these land development regulations may be maintained and repaired except as provided in sections 34-345 and 34-346 below. Section 34-345 states, a structure not in conformance with these regulations shall not be extended, enlarged, or expanded where such activity will result in a greater nonconformity with respect to such standards as setback, height, lot coverage, or density. Section 34-345A further states, a structure not in conformance with these regulations shall not be rebuilt or repaired after damage exceeding 50% of the assessed value of the structure on the date of the damage, as determined and maintained by Brevard County Property Appraiser's Office. The nonconformity may be maintained and repaired, but it cannot be expanded or rebuilt. Granting the variance will confer upon the applicant a special privilege that is denied by the ordinance to other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning. The hardship appears to be self-created. In 1966, the building appears to have been originally constructed as part of the building located on 1019 Garden under single ownership. Subsequent to 1993 citywide rezoning, the property was subdivided into 2 parcels. There are no records to indicate the division of land was approved by the city. Therefore, staff's conclusion is the hardship is a self-created issue. Approving the variance would not preserve the spirit of the ordinance and would not be in harmony with its general purpose and intent. Staff recommends denial of the variance of allowing the rear yard setback of 0 feet for an existing building. The special conditions and circumstances are self-created. The variance request is not the minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Approval of the variance would grant the applicant rights not commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district under the terms of the ordinance. Granting the variance does not preserve the spirit of the ordinance and will not remain in harmony with its general purpose and intent. The intent of the zoning regulations is to remove nonconformities and impose a uniform set of development standards. Thank you.
What is the minimum variance that would make the reasonable use of the land?
I'm not sure if there would be one with this situation.
If I may, the buildings are constructed back to back. There's literally no separation between the two. So 0 is what's required.
I mean, the building exists already, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's 0 feet already, right?
Correct.
So if this variance wasn't requested, the building would be there at 0 feet? So are they trying to do something to this building or literally just get it in conformity?
I believe the applicant's registered agent could help answer that. I don't have anything from the variance justification.
So in essence, the only way to bring this building into conformity is to tear it, part of it down. Would that be a correct answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff before we open up to the public? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open this up to the public portion of the meeting. Do we have any cards, please?
Bruce Moyer.
Mr. Moyer, welcome, and please give your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Adjustments and Appeals. This is my first time before this board, so hopefully it won't be as confusing as the last issue. I'll try to do my best to make it clear. My name is Bruce Moy. I'm the president of MBB Engineering. We operate out of 1250 West O'Galley Boulevard in Melbourne, Florida, and I'm representing the applicant. And appears I'm already behind the 8 ball on this one because staff is not supporting our request and claiming that it is a self-imposed hardship. Been looking at these types of things for a long time. Actually sat on the Board of Adjustments at Palm Bay for a while, and usually self-imposed means the actual applicant was the one that created their own hardship. That's not what happened here. This building was built in 1966. He just purchased the building in 2024, in January of this year. Sometime in the early 90s, it appears that this property was split. There's an underlying plat, so they just sold off the south 3 lots. And so this gentleman bought this property and the vacant property to the east. Gave me a call and said, hey, I'd like to fix it up, make a new development, change this thing up and make it nice. And I said, well, you can't do anything to that building. It's non-conforming, you can't touch it, you can't do anything. This, as a matter of fact, if it gets damaged, if you have a hurricane and the tornado comes through and damages that building, you can't even rebuild it. So he was obviously shocked seeing he just bought this property. So I said, the only thing you can do is get a variance. We felt that it had a really good chance because it's been there for, what's the math, almost 60 years now. And it only became non-conforming about 30-something years ago. So pretty much every building in this area is non-conforming. The building to the north is non-conforming. It's on 0 setback. The building to the west is non-conforming. It's on a 0 setback. And out of about 24 properties with the similar zoning as this, probably over 75% of them have some kind of a setback nonconformist. Back in 2015, this board granted setbacks to a property about 3 blocks to the east, well, 2 blocks to the east, for 5 setback variances for a building that existed because the applicant wasn't the one that created the hardship. He just bought the property, and whatever he wanted to do, he couldn't do, so he came here for a variance and got, I believe, over 5 setback variances, so we could do something with the property. So this guy wants to do something. The property is basically a mechanic's shop. At the minimum, it's got a very low ceiling. He would like to raise the ceiling, redo the front. Possibly anything that would be not part of this building would be done to current code, whatever he can or can't do, because he doesn't have a whole lot of room to do too much stuff. But anything besides this building would be in conformance with your current code. But he would like to at least raise the roof on the building, because, if you have a low bay, you can't really do a lot in that building, because, like I say, it was built in 1966. Things have changed to this day. So he really would like to do something with this building and this site, and this is step one. If this doesn't happen, then I don't know what he's going to do, probably nothing, and it'll sit there for the next 60 years until somebody can do something with it. But really here to answer any questions that you have. I believe that we're not asking for anything that anybody doesn't already have. This property fronts Orange Street, which is the street south of Garden Street, so it does not front your major thoroughfare. So you can't even see this building from the road. I don't know if that makes any difference, but it's not something that anybody's really going to notice. So if you have any questions, that's really all I have to say.
Well, just confirm, to your knowledge, the applicant's not looking to expand or put new walls up or anything. It's just not putting a second floor, but raising the roof so that it has more room in the first area. Is that correct?
That's his desire, yes.
And the outside of the building, well, hopefully he'll dress it up. It won't look like it has in the past, but it will not be any physical change, taking any more space or parking area or anything like that. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. Unless he decides to, like I say, he does own the property to the east, but all that would be conforming to your current code, so.
Okay.
He may put another building or put some parking or whatever he's going to do.
Okay, but that would be
Totally separate from
It'd be
this.
totally separate from
Yeah.
this. All right, thank you.
Out of curiosity, what's I think I'm using the word right, depth from Orange Street through the structure to the other structure, it's up on Garden Street? What's that
So
width?
the property has a depth of 125 feet. It's a little bit less because, and I'm not even positive about this, because one of the things he is asking for, and this is coming up later, is to vacate the remainder of Orange Street, because Orange Street is mostly vacated except for the portion in front of his property. And he owns the north half of Orange Street on this parcel. But I'm not positive if that parcel was reverted back to the city. So
Okay.
we're going through that process to clean that up. So
For another
currently, he has about 125 feet of depth.
Okay.
The gentleman has applied or spoken to the city about making these improvements?
No,
And that's what
this is
brought
the
this up?
first thing we're asking for this variance. If this is successful, we're going to follow up with a right-of-way vacate, and that'll give us the property to be able to do some additional improvements to the property.
I see. Okay.
No other questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any other cards?
No, sir.
Very well. Then we will close the public hearing and bring this matter back before the board. Do we have further questions or discussion on this?
I have a further question for staff. Yes. The improvements described by the gentleman appear to be not an expansion of the nonconformity. Is that your interpretation?
As described, yes.
Okay. So actually the variance would not be necessary to do the internal improvements or do any aesthetics to the exterior of the building.
Correct.
Including
Well,
increased elevation?
excluding the elevation, yes, I
Excluding
apologize.
the elevation.
Excluding the elevation. The elevation is where the variance, because that's expanding upon the height of the building.
Is it the city's position that a property, a potential buyer of a property should verify whether or not their structure is in conformity, and if it's not, to then not purchase it? I ask that in light of reasonable use of the land, because the staff report specifically says this is not the minimum variance needed to make reasonable use of the land. And so I know that's one of the criteria, but it's specifically used in there. So is it the city's position that a potential buyer should not buy a property that is non-conforming?
If I may, I think that the intent of the nonconformity code is to not allow further development and encroachment and expansion of those nonconforming properties. And by granting this variance, it would create a level of conformity that would put the property on par with a new construction that was built to city's code, which this one is not. And so you would be bringing up this nonconforming property to that level that it's not. And it would be allowed to rebuild if it was destroyed, which it's currently not. And that's the big distinction.
No, I'm agreeing.
And that's the big distinction with a non-conforming property. It's not that we don't want new buyers or property owners to acquire and use, make the reasonable use of that property. It's currently at the most and the highest, best reasonable use of the existing property as it stands today. And as a pure analysis of how a non-conforming property is looked at, they're not encouraged to be treated as the same as new construction that is built to city's current code, because it's just simply not that. And it's up to the board to evaluate whether this property has the level of standards that you think meets the rest of the buildings that you want to see in the city of Titusville. It's not that we want the property to be destroyed, but if it becomes, if it's abandoned, if its use is abandoned, then it can't be continued after a certain period of time. But if it's actively in use, that's great. That's where it's at now. And so that's just hopefully to give you a little bit of insight on how nonconformities are looked at in the code, because it's just, they're a nuance that you have to look at as for what they are.
I agree with the majority of that. I'm looking at PDF page 36. And if I'm understanding this red box here, that this red box is the edges of the actual owned property.
Yes.
And if I'm looking at it correctly, that structure goes all the way up, all the way down, and all the way to the right.
Because they were built as one. That is one structure to the one to the north. On Garden Street.
I'm
Is
looking,
that what-
are you on page 36?
Yes. Are you talking about the south
He's saying the
portion?
top part of the T is connected outside of the red
No,
box.
I'm not even talking about the one that's on Garden Street. I'm just saying in that red line, that half that red box is completely filled with a structure. I mean, it goes all the way to the edge of the property line on the north and the south and the east, right?
Now to the east, that's common ownership. They own that parcel. It's just
But it's
not
still a
included
separate
in the
parcel that would
variance.
have setbacks, right?
With the common ownership, you can often defer to the setbacks of
Okay,
the total.
it happens to have common ownership, but my point would be, if something were to happen to the structure and they're not permitted to rebuild in this light because of the nonconformity, and it's 125 feet in depth, will any property be able to meet the code and be constructed there under the current standards?
I do believe that it does meet the standards for that zoning district where it would be able. So at the,
Because I do agree that simply saying, okay, let's go ahead and make it in conformity, and then, they're building up and doing whatever, I agree that that is problematic, which is also problematic with this system of saying, here's our one variance to get started, because we need to get the baseline started, and then we're gonna do this, this, and this, which is gonna need all these other things. And that's why we ask these questions, even though that's not before us, because all we need to know is whether it's in conformity or not. And if all we looked at was, okay, bought it in a property built in 1966, this is not the guy who made it out of conformity, yeah, let's bring it in conformity. If we only looked in that vacuum, I'd probably be inclined to grant it. But once we start asking questions about what's coming down the pike that's not before us today, then I'm inclined to not grant it. And that's the concern. So I'm thinking if it's not gonna be in conformity and it gets knocked down, they can't rebuild it in this way, is there still a reasonable use of the land under the current code?
Yes. With the setbacks that are there, for if you were to do a new build, you would be able to place something.
Like something like, not like a drive-through square coffee shop. Like
Is a
an actual
25-foot front setback, 10-foot interior.
Well, right. I mean, it's 125 feet in depth.
Yeah.
All right.
In reading your recommendations, the city's recommendations, it states, and the applicant stated that there are other properties in the same zoning district that were granted, it says, approval of the variance would grant the applicant rights not commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district under the same terms of the ordinance. Are you familiar with any properties in that zoning district that were granted?
The variance that the applicant was discussing was for a cell tower, and the special condition was the platting was done prior to hang on, because I have it here. The site was platted prior to the administrative rezoning, so it was a little bit different circumstances, and that the lot itself, there was rectangular with 132 by 46 feet. So there was a little difference in for that parcel, but I know each variance is on its own merits.
Well, actually, as a follow-up to that, the property that's on Garden Street, was there a variance for that property at any point in time? Because that would literally go to commonly enjoyed by properties in the same zoning district if it's sharing a property line.
Are you talking about the original? The
Yeah.
1019 Garden?
Yes.
I mean, that was constructed in 1966. I'm not sure what the. Oh, no, I haven't there's no others on file for 1019 Garden.
Okay, that would have made a difference to me.
Do we have any other?
I-
Yes,
I'm just curious, what kind of repairs to the property can the applicant do?
So with on page 35, it's this is not extended, enlarged, or expanded, but they can be maintained and repaired. So if the repair is not extending or enlarging or.
So raising the
That's all we
ceiling,
have.
would that be acceptable?
It would be enlarging or expanding upon the building, I believe.
All right.
Raising the ceiling is one thing, that would be an internal improvement. Raising the roof would be a structural improvement, which is what,
I
Well,
understand.
one time he said ceiling, and the second time he was talking, he said roof, so I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what he's talking about increasing anyway.
So maybe we
Kent, would you
should
like to
clarify
clarify?
that.
Yeah, in order to get the height that he desires, he would have to raise the roof as well as the ceiling. Yeah. So it would be structural, and that was one of the reasons we came, because we can't do that to that building because it is non-conforming
Thank you.
because of the setback.
And see, like, this is where I'm concerned about the authority of the board, because what would be equitable might be to say, we will grant the request to the extent to bring in conformity for the strict purpose of allowing X amount of feet higher on a roof. But then we're outside of our sandbox because we don't know what the actual plans are gonna be. There's gonna have to be approvals and permits and all sorts of stuff that we can't deal with. So, but if we just do a blanket, approval of it, then we're really far out. I mean, I definitely don't fault the applicant for seeking the variance for a property he bought from 1966 that happens to fill up that red box. I do not find that I don't think it should be denied as it's his own fault, because it's not.
It's my opinion that any opportunity that we have to allow a owner to bring a building up to the current building code, which is what this is actually, we should take advantage of it. If there's an opportunity to allow them to build a new roof that's going to meet the 150 mile an hour wind speed requirements of the city of Titusville, we should allow that if we have that opportunity. We're standing in the way of that. Otherwise, we're going to have a building that's not only non-conforming to the city ordinances, it's non-conforming to the building code. So that's a critical issue that we probably should consider.
Excuse me? If the board is inclined to grant this variance, there's the ability for the board to grant the approval with conditions, and you could tie the approval of the setback to anything on the existing property. You could limit the
To the
development to the, you could say to the width
Yeah,
or
to the width of the existing building.
or
I
the
believe it's
footprint of the existing,
91.8
depending on how you
feet.
want to phrase it. I don't know if there's particular language that you may want to ask the applicant, if there's a scope that you want to contain your approval within, but that is something that the board has discretion to do.
To limit it to that structure, existing
I would
structure.
like to see something more specific, though, because like she's saying, I don't want to just give them a blanket permission to go out and do all kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
we not be on the same page. And have we ever approved a variance before, like an application was made?
Yeah.
To some degree. That's
But
what,
how do you know what you're approving, is what I'm saying?
that's what.
That's my question.
That's what our counselor was referring to, that we would ask the applicant to define a scope.
Okay.
What do you think about the language of limiting it to the footprint?
Actually, that would be exactly what I would prefer.
Invite the applicant back up, just for.
Yes, sir. Would you please come back up for a question for you, sir? Would,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
she has a question about wording.
What are your thoughts on the language of, if we were to grant it, to say non-conforming to the extent that you can do whatever within the existing footprint?
That would be perfectly acceptable.
Should there be a height limit?
Be subject to the height of the zoning district.
Subject to what
Unless
now?
it would be subject to the height of the zoning district unless you put any further restrictive.
What
which
what
is-
is this? Okay, what is that?
50-foot maximum for that
Oh,
M1 zoning.
Well, like I asked a question earlier, would it be just to make the roof higher, not to necessarily put a second floor on it?
When I
Now,
said, if I may, just the footprint would contain the building to not be expanded in square footage.
Right.
And that would limit the building from that type of expansion, but it would allow the vertical improvements that were described.
Okay,
Subject
Yes.
to the city's limitations.
Yes.
okay.
I would say if you're going to include a height limitation, I would entertain a discussion on that as well.
Now, to note, one of the, for the setbacks, there is a footnote for it for plus 1 foot for each foot of building height over 35 feet. When you go higher than 35 feet, the setback starts to reduce, so if 35.
What's the height that we're talking about?
We have no desire to go over 35
You're
feet.
talking
Yeah.
10.
We're
Right.
not- Yeah, we're not even going over
Okay.
25. so.
All right, I'm good.
I think that's it. Thank you. All right. All right. Any other discussion or questions?
I have another card, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you have another card?
Yes,
I'm
Michael
sorry.
Grave, is it Grave? Grove? Okay.
Yes. Welcome, sir. If you would come up and give us your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Good evening, board members. My name is Michael Graw. I'm a little bit nervous, not used to speaking in front of people. I didn't intend to speak at all. My wife and I bought the property.
Your address, please, sir.
28, my home address or the building address? My home address is 2862 Chapelwood Court in Oviedo, Florida, 32765.
Thank you.
Yeah. We bought the property with the intention of fixing it up, doing some stucco and cleaning it up, painting it, putting up some lighting, and renting it out. And we did stabilize the building. There was some stabilization issues which were minor and were corrected. We did stucco the building anyway and painted it, put some exterior lighting up. It looks tremendous, much different than it did when we bought it. But we're running into the problem with the height, even with mechanics now. Getting lifts in is impossible really for them. So they even the mechanics were kind of not using lifts, and we've had no luck renting the property since we bought it. And that's the main reason that we're asking for this.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant? Thank you, sir. Well, do I have a motion to be presented?
With reference to variance number 22-2024, 1010 Orange Street and 1020 Orange Street, I recommend approval of the variance requesting a variance to LDR Chapter 28, Section 28, 317, with the condition that any improvements be restricted to the footprint of the building.
I'll second.
All right. Staff, does that sound acceptable as far as exceptions? Okay. Any other discussion? May we have roll call, please?
Member Beckles?
Yes.
Member Smith Rodriguez?
Yes.
Member Wheelis?
Yes.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes.
Vice Chairwoman Van Deven?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Congratulations, sir. I hope to see you for more development here. Thank you. All right, we will go now to our next item, which is variance number 23-2024, the address being 3125 Columbia Boulevard. So staff?
Thank you, Chair. For variance number 23-2024, the request is the applicant is requesting a variance to the Land Development Regulations, Chapter 32, Section 32-10, Wall Sign Regulations, to allow one additional wall sign for a building that has only one street frontage on an existing paved right-of-way for a property located in the Community Commercial Zoning District at 3125 Columbia Boulevard, as submitted by Jonathan Skinner of Sign Lords, authorized agent for FSM Titusville LLC owner. Powers of the BAA is read earlier. For staff analysis, the applicant is requesting a variance of the Land Development Regulations, Section 32-10A2, to allow one additional wall sign for a building that has only one street frontage on an existing paved right-of-way. Single-tenant buildings are allowed to have one wall sign unless the building has more than one street frontage. Right-of-ways are defined in LDR Section 37-1 as land reserved, used, or to be used for a street, alley, walkway, drainage facility, or other public use or service purpose, and the title to which is in public ownership. The applicant is requesting to be allowed a second wall sign on the west side of the building that faces the parking lot. There are parking aisles on the western side, but the nearest right-of-way is over 700 feet away from the building. The lot is similar to other lots within the same zoning district, and there appears to be no hardship that would result in the need for an additional wall sign. The business with one wall sign and one ground sign will be visible from the adjacent public right-of-way. Staff recommends denial of the variance. There are no special conditions and circumstances that exist which are peculiar to the land structure or building involved and which are not applicable to other land structures or buildings in the same zoning. The literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would not deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning. The variance is not the minimum necessary for reasonable use of the land, building, or structure, and the business with one wall sign and one ground sign will be visible from the adjacent public right-of-way. Thank you.
Staff, when this particular building was used previously, was there a sign on the western wall where the entrance to the pub?
Yes,
There was a sign.
there was a sign.
Okay. Was it just not permitted, to your knowledge, or was it just,
It was under permit. The review, from what I understand, the code was the same, but that area was determined to be a right-of-way, and staff do not see that, make that same interpretation now.
okay? Although there is a flow from the front of the property to the rear to the property behind, is that correct? In other words, there's an entrance.
Yes, there is.
From the north to go south, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have, did you see any diagram or anything of the kind of sign they wish to put on the property?
Sign elevation on page 51.
That's on this,
Isn't that on the right of way?
that's
that
on,
sign?
that's to the street. I mean, to the 405.
That
it not?
was the elevation provided by the applicant.
Okay. Because, all right, so that's, all right, we don't, in other words, we don't have a, okay,
So-
at this time, we don't have that. Maybe we'll be enlightened with that. Okay, any other questions for staff on this matter?
No.
Okay,
There was an indication in the verbiage that the adjacent building has had a similar variance request and approval for a second sign.
There was not a variance request, but that was something that was permitted for the second on that other side of I believe it's a dental office. And for a Google Maps, that is the side elevation of what we're discussing.
yes, okay. All right, any other questions? If not, oh, yes?
So the dental office had I think I misunderstood. The dental office had a variance that was approved?
No, it was a permit that was approved,
Just a permit.
just a permit to allow the two wall signs.
Is that an option for this property?
Not without the variance. The staff review on that was, again, this was years ago. And they allowed if that had been reviewed today, that would not be the case. They would need the variance.
Okay.
Different staff, different
I'm
interpretation.
reading the provision that says the literal interpretation provisions of the ordinance would not deprive the applicants of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning, but it would.
It did not appear that there was a planning review on those sign permits.
Jonathan Skinner.
My name is Jonathan Skinner. My address is 984 Nicholas Drive, Rockledge, Florida. You'll forgive me, I've done a few of these, but I still get a little nervous. So I am the sign contractor here on behalf of the owner, and it is our position that this is a misinterpretation of right-of-way. So I'm not sure if I was supposed to give these up front, but as far as we can tell, dating back to 2001 when this building was built, it was a Ryan Steakhouse. That's when it was built from ground up. And after that, it was a Whistle Junction. After that, it was Buffet Village. After that, it was Bamboo Garden. In every iteration of this building since it was built, it has had a sign on that wall, as well as the dentist office, which is the only neighbor impacted, which is the only property that we can compare it to as far as enjoying the same rights. They have a wall sign. The building's 2001. It's not like it's, a 60-year-old out-of-code building. Even the dentist office, I looked it up, was built, that sign permit went through less than 10 years ago. So it is a different staff, but we're not talking about a totally different time or anything.
Do you have any references to size of what we're talking about?
I believe the elevation that she had on file is correct. Just both sides of that building look very similar. There's an A-pitched frame on both sides. It would be conforming with all the regular sign codes as far as when a second sign is allowed. It's going to be smaller than the main sign. less than 20% of the wall. The other main issue here is that is the entrance to the restaurant. So the sign that faces the road may or may not be where people are coming in through, because that little, what we consider a right-of-way, does go back through the parking lot to Target. That side is where patrons would park and walk through a front door to eat. They're going to walk into an unmarked building if they happen to be coming from the other direction.
Staff, would you show him page 51? That photo is.
That is the one we're requesting. That is the side that faces the dentist's office, that faces the street pass-through.
Okay.
On the survey, on page 53, this is the,
Okay, now,
The
okay,
30.
now I'm seeing it.
okay.
All right, I got other photos here now.
Yeah, in that packet, I have a picture of the sign that has already been approved and installed, as well as the one that we're requesting. And both sides of the building look very similar.
Yeah, all right, yeah, I was confused. Thank you. My question. Any other question? So this is not a new, it's something that's been in existence with the building since it's been there. And, yes, okay. Questions? Anyone else? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have any other cards?
No, sir.
All right, in case we will close the public portion of the meeting for this. And any discussion or comments? I personally can see a problem with not having a sign where the entrance to the building is. Being, people might think to have to walk back to where the sign is on the front of the property. And seeing how, I mean, it's just facing another building and parking lot. I don't see how the public is not being honored in that.
Well, more notably, if the city determined that road to be a right-of-way and granted a permit to another building in the same zoning district next door, that road still exists, it should still be considered a right-of-way, and he should be able to do it by permit. But if not, the variance would be appropriate. The mere fact that staff itself changes, I don't think should be our barometer.
Any other discussion or thoughts?
It seems as though historically the administrations have determined that that is an appropriate location for the sign, that secondary sign. I don't know what's changed other than the staff, but
There's actually a stop sign there, isn't it? Isn't there a stop sign there? In that, on that little right-of-way? Yeah.
I believe you're right. I do believe we've run into this in other locations with internal facing buildings that have regular right-of-way exposure and also internal exposure, and signs are necessary. They're part of the business requirements.
Well, if there's no other discussion, entertain a motion.
With reference to variance 232024 at 325 Columbia Boulevard, I make a motion to grant the variance.
To allow the, as
Yeah,
requested?
to allow a second sign
As requested, okay.
as requested.
All right, have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, may we have roll call, please?
Member Wheelis?
Yes.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes?
Vice Chairwoman Van Deven?
Yes.
Member Beckles?
Yes.
Member Smith Rodriguez?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you for coming up this evening, and look forward to another establishment there. All right, now we'll go to our final item tonight, variance number 24-2024 at the address of 1793 Crossville Drive. Staff, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. For variance 24-2024, 1793 Crossbill Drive, the applicant is requesting a variance to the Land Development Regulations, Chapter 30, Section 30-321, Plant Materials, to allow the use of a prohibited material in the form of artificial turf for a property located in the Planned Development Zoning District as submitted by Stunning Backyards LLC, authorized agent for Florenz Claridad Quitlong and Mildred M. Fortich Quitlong, owners. Powers in BAA remain as stated earlier. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow the use of artificial grass in place of natural grass. Section 30-321F of the Land Development Regulations states synthetic plants prohibited. Synthetic or artificial material in the form of trees, shrubs, ground covers, vines, or artificial turf shall not be used in lieu of plant requirements in this section. The Brevard County Property Appraiser's website shows that the single-family resident was built in 2022 as part of South Carpenter Estates plan development. The Plan Development PD zoning has the development standards that were put in place by Ordinance 40-2017. Section 1.8D of Ordinance 40-2017 places a maximum 45% impervious coverage on lots within South Carpenter Estates. In 2022, this lot was approved for a single-family residence with an impervious coverage of 4,518 square feet, or 39.3% of the lot. This allowed for a remaining 650 square feet of impervious coverage on the lot. The applicant has a pending building permit for a 192 square foot pool. As shown by the submitted site plan, the owner is requesting to place turf in the rear yard surrounding the pool. The applicant has not submitted the product specification showing the permeability rate for the type of turf proposed. Without the product specification, staff is unable to confirm if the proposed artificial grass would be considered pervious. The lot does not appear to have any special conditions or circumstances that are peculiar to the land that would create a hardship to prevent natural landscaping. Staff recommend denial of the variance. There are no special conditions or circumstances which are peculiar to the land that would make it different from similar lots in the subdivision. The request is a self-created hardship. The applicant can meet the literal interpretation of the ordinance by placing natural landscaping. Denying the request will not deprive the applicant's rights commonly enjoyed by other properties. Thank you.
Okay, we've had discussion on artificial grass. I'm looking at page 71 and trying to understand what areas. I see a diagram, I see a pool. Are we talking about this artificial grass being that entire area where the little squares are?
Yes, that is my understanding.
So instead of putting a concrete
The applicant.
surface, yeah.
So there was a building permit, the one in lieu. They had tried other means and it exceeded the impervious from what I understand. That's with engineering's review. So their path forward for them was to move forward with artificial grass, or try to.
It does say permeable artificial. It says permeable artificial grass on page 71. Can you see that text?
In the
It's-
squared area, just above
It's
the pool.
really small.
Take it wider.
That's fine too.
It's like just above that box that has the 12-foot width. Where it has like those check boxes. It says
Oh.
permeable artificial grass.
Oh, there. So it's not the entire area since it's turned.
Well, I think it's that whole checked
The
area.
whole checked area is my understanding.
Oh, just,
The question is on page 72. Can you point it out?
72. So 72 is just the survey. I don't
Survey.
believe
It
that
doesn't show that.
the proposal pool or turf area is shown on there.
yeah.
In the report where it says that the applicant hasn't submitted specifications to determine whether it's permeable, that actually won't make a difference, correct? Even if it's permeable, it's still artificial, which would be banned by the code?
Correct. It's just previous experiences, we've looked into that, so that's why I included
We have,
that
yeah,
information.
So it's my understanding that if they had presented sample permeable artificial grass, that it would be granted?
No, it would have just been evaluated to whether it met the standards or not. The synthetic turf is still prohibited by code. Staff have received guidance from council to evaluate that and create some ordinance. That has nothing that has gone through or passed yet or been done. That's still in processing. But so until this time, artificial turf is still prohibited, and the process that we've been doing is the variance requests. This one is just different because the turf is not there.
I'm still confused by the picture shown here, what would be in that area. I guess we'll wait and ask the applicant then. All right. Any other questions? Okay, we'll open up the public hearing at this time. Do we have a cards, please?
I don't have one for an applicant. I have two others. Tony Schifolo would be first.
All right, thank you. Welcome. Your name and address for the record, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Tony Schifolo, the historic Norwood House, Tropic Street. I've been following this issue rather closely, first when it was presented by staff because they were getting so many requests for variances, and you would know, I have heard it was really very few, 3, 4 maybe, and then this one came around. The applicant has not submitted product specifications. The TEC studied this issue very carefully, and their recommendation to council is to not have an ordinance that allows artificial turf. The ordinance that we have now says no, and it was read, so I'm not going to waste my time to read it again, but I just want to know how much clearer does it need to be to say no to the use of synthetic or artificial plants, trees, shrubs, ground covers, or vines, or artificial turf. And there are many references throughout our code, that code repeating the prohibition of artificial turf. And staff provided council with some alternatives. They provided 2 other places in this, 2 other cities, towns, areas, I would call them communities, in the state of Florida that do allow artificial turf, and they're both parts of Metro North Miami. Ocean Ridge had a population in the 2020 census of only 1,830 citizens, while Tequesta had 6,158, and neither place having really enough acreage for the use of artificial turf to make an environmental difference, but any use of artificial turf makes an environmental difference. And I think that staff really hit it right in this time to recommend a denial of this variance. And also, I think as a citizen who bought property with a particular zoning, and I found out what I could do or could not do with that property before I bought it. I did my due diligence, as any person doing something as major as buying a home should do, and realized that, oh, there's a regulation against using artificial turf in this town, especially when you're considering getting a pool. I think the pool people are selling these people, the applicants, a real bill of sales, because the reasons that they use for claiming that they need to use this artificial turf around their pool is we aim to create a permeable surface. We don't know if it will be. And actually what we know about artificial turf is that during the installation, the ground is compacted and things are put there so that weeds will not grow and grow through the artificial turf for a few months or years maybe. And therefore, these people, the applicants saying, we aim to create a permeable surface that allows for effective water absorption. That it may be permeable and the water may go through, but don't forget all the pieces and particles of the plastic that are deteriorating in this Florida sunshine and the weather that we have here. All the deterioration is also permeating through to the soil and into the water system, our aquifers, and I'm a member of Speak Up Titusville that brought the referendum for clean water. I'm very concerned about the Indian River Lagoon. And if you'll notice on your map of this property, the backyard feeds right into the retention pond for this community. And where does that water flow? I would ask you, to the Indian River Lagoon, carrying all those PFABs, all those PFAS, all those plastic particles. They say our proposed use of artificial grass around the deck aligns with local regulations. The local regulation says no artificial turf, no artificial plants, no artificial. So it's not aligning with the local regulations that focus on sustainable and eco-friendly practices. The use of artificial turf is not an eco-friendly practice. I would like for you to continue your due diligence, and as you study things and think about things, you're the final place. I would like to see the fact that anybody that wants to use artificial turf in this town has to have a variance. It shouldn't be allowed unless there's a really specific hardship, like, oh, I have 10 children and they're all allergic to natural grass, and I need to make a little play area outside my screen porch. That would be a reason for a variance. I don't see that because you are putting in a swimming pool that's going to have lots of water splashing over, therefore lots of rinsing of the PFABs, PFAS, the micro particles of the plastic that are deteriorating. I think I've said enough that you get the drift that I think it's a really bad idea to allow this in this area of Titusville on the Indian River Lagoon, where we are so desperately trying to retrieve and reclaim and save the river. Please don't allow people to do things that are going to stymie that progress and actually contribute more to the degradation. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight.
Thank you. We have another card.
Michael Myjack.
All right. Welcome, sir. Your name and address for the record, please.
Michael Myjack, Alpine Lane. I'm the chair of the Titusville Environmental Commission, and as Ms. Schifolo had said, we have spent the last meeting discussing this issue quite extensively. I can safely say that there's really no safe place for synthetic or plastic plants in Titusville or in Florida. It's just not proper. And there are many communities that are undergoing contentious battles like this, just like here. Proponents will often claim that the synthetic turf stays green in the sun, it doesn't fade, it's quick to drain, mostly heat and frost resistant. It's perfect for patios, decks, and balconies. No mowing, no maintenance, tastes great, less filling, no problems, right? The trouble is, opponents are concerned about exposure to the toxicants that leach from the manufacture of this product. Made from recycled tires, plastic carpet, and other synthetic components, the material breaks down in heat and ultraviolet light over time. Mind you, it doesn't decompose. It actually falls apart into little bits and pieces that are unnatural and disruptive to our natural environment. Your average artificial lawn might last a decade and cost thousands to install. The New York Times recently did a study that followed the cost of an average 980 square foot area professionally installed was well worth, well, actually, the prices were over $10,000 for 3 different estimates. If it lasts 10 years, that's $1,000 a year estimate, investment. Not a really great long-term investment for a yard, especially compared to many of the number of long-lasting landscape alternatives we have. Also, according to the Times, numerous studies have shown that the chemicals identified in artificial turf include polycystic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, phthalates, which I'm sure you've heard of. They make plastics soft and flexible. They also provide per and polyfluoroalkylates known as PFAS and PFOS. These are known carcinogens. They're neurotoxins. They're mutagens, and they cause endocrine disruption. They will sterilize the land that it's laid on. There will be nothing living in the soil underneath. This is what we understand about the leachate from artificial turf. It doesn't magically turn into disintegratium and evaporate from the universe. The impact, along with the course of its useful lifespan, coupled with the complications related to the disposal of synthetic turf, raise serious questions about its long-term sustainability. Let's put it another way. As an alternative, imagine dedicating the same $1,000 a year toward maintaining and slowly improving the landscape on the property. Same duration, two possible outcomes. By the year 2035, either you'll have a show-stopping array of mature native plantings supporting a thriving ecosystem, or a worn-out and degraded scrap of fake turf to be ripped up and tucked into a landfill, which would expose an old, dead patch of earth, suddenly in serious need of refurbishment. This is what we're talking about. There's no need for landscape material that's synthetic. It doesn't help our environment, and it won't help Titusville or our neighborhoods. So I agree with the city. We should deny this one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other cards?
No, sir.
All right, then we will close this part of the public hearing and bring it back for further questions or discussion.
I'll go first.
All right.
I know historically, even this year, I think, definitely in the last 2 years, and I think Ms. Armstrong said, and I think she's right, that they all already had artificial turf already placed, and then they came here. And we agreed as a board that if it was behind the fence and nobody's gonna see it, and it's, around their pool, fine, so be it. And this is where we are. And the applicant, in writing that it kind of aligns with the code, I know what they're referring to because I said the exact same thing. In the code, it says that ground cover should be so as to present a finished appearance, and kind of goes on aesthetics. And artificial turf certainly does that. And then a couple months ago, I was aggressively educated on environmental effects of artificial turf. And so this presentation today by the two people who are not applicants and who are only citizens of our community, caring enough to show up, have made the most informative argument regarding artificial turf, for or against or otherwise, that this board has heard. And that's what we should have heard the last 3 or 4 times that we've had artificial turf arguments. So in contrast of my previous opinions, now that I have been further educated months ago and further today, I see a great problem that would justify not granting this variance. I still think the city needs to address several things collectively regarding artificial turf, but for this point right now, I would deny it.
I would agree with that also, but I would agree that the city should come out with a position.
Well, but they did. It
Well, they
says,
have
don't do
a
it.
position, but people keep saying they're going to discuss it. Well, let them make the decision. Not going to discuss it. I mean, if it's not going to happen, just be that way so they don't keep coming back to us. If we have a clear understanding the city is not going to approach this, I think, yeah, that's no.
Well, let us not forget, the day that we had a variance meeting in here regarding Parish Park and paving that and making it into a drive and a parking lot and the bulkheads, let us not forget that when that variance was continued, within that 30-day window, the city obtained a rule or regulation or something that said any issue that affects the community at large, I'm summing up, should be going before city council. And quite frankly, if this is an environmental issue for this property, which affects all properties and the land beneath it and in the community, Indian River, maybe city council should be taking things up like this. I don't recommend that today. I think we need to solve the problem today. But in general, if that's what the last cause was, maybe that's what this cause should be.
And also, they're not here. The evidence that they presented of where they want it is unclear. And they don't mention a hardship other than, the water splashing out onto the grass or whatever. So I don't see a good argument for it or reason to grant it. Like I said, I don't see a hardship mentioned.
I do want to give the applicants kudos, though, for applying for the variance prior to putting down their turf. I really do appreciate the respect that they had enough for the city and the code to do that first.
Any further discussion?
I was just going to add, just 2 points, is that it's terrible for animals and wildlife. I'm saying artificial turf. And I don't know if you've ever been around artificial turf, but it's hot as heck. Just standing out on grass is hot. It's going to be hot squared standing on artificial turf. So you're preaching to the choir when you're talking to me.
Well, if there's no other discussion, I will consider a motion.
I don't see it as appropriate either. There's not enough information here to make an informed decision anyway. The square footage is not delineated. The type of permeable artificial grass is not spelled out. So we have nothing to really make a judgment on. So I have no other option other than to make a motion to deny this variance request. And if I knew what the number was, I would make it, if you can assist me.
Are you making the motion, or? Oh, then go to page 65.
Variance number 24/2024. Recommend denial based on it would grant rights to the owner, others are not allowed.
I'll second it.
Vice Chairwoman Van Deven,
You say yes to deny.
Yeah, yes to deny.
Member Beckles,
Yes.
Member Smith Rodriguez,
Yes.
Member Wheelis,
Yes?
Chairman Taylor.
Yes. All right. So that ends that discussion for now. Okay, it's open now. Is there any public discussion or anyone that wishes to make any public comments?
Tony Schiffele, the Historic Norwood House, congratulations and thank you very much. And I believe that education about artificial turf is only just beginning. We all think, it was great for the football players, but ask them about playing on artificial turf, the scrapes and the scars that they have. I just wanted to use this public comment time to perhaps give a little bit more background. This came to council already because they were getting requests, and the ordinance is so clear, no artificial plants of any kind, and for good reason. I want to remind you of a couple of years ago, the CRA had a plan they proposed to beautify downtown. They were going to hang baskets from the lamp poles of artificial plants. And people found out about it and were so incensed that we would do something along what's it called? I call it Main Street, but the downtown historic area, which is like 2 blocks off the Indian River Lagoon and all that plastic. because we've been studying this for a while about the foibles and problems of plastic plants. So anyway, staff had been getting so many requests for artificial turf, and it had to be brought to you as a variance, and I guess they don't want to bother you, although I think it's good job insurance, you know, for this board, if people are going to have to come and get a variance to get artificial turf where they should be planting native plants. And I would like to point out that the Titusville Tree Team that I'm also a part of is pushing for and has been working with both the TEC and council to get landscaping guidelines to to designate native Florida plants, Florida natives, and plants that are specifically growing in the zone that Brevard County is in. We're trying to push that to be a regulation so that they won't have to come for variances about things like that. So there is some activity going on. I would urge you to be very vigilant and keep your eye on this, because as you get the requests for variances, because right now that's what happens to people that want to use artificial turf, they have to come to you. And you should be very aware of how harmful it is to the environment and how much it should not be used here where we are so hard trying to encourage developers and subdivision investors to, when they clear cut most of the trees, to replant native Florida not even friendly, native Florida plants and plants that are specific to the Brevard County area. And so I want to thank you again for your vote to not allow, it looks like to me on that diagram, a very large area, not just surrounding the very pool, but most of the yard there. So I think you made a very good call there. Thank you.
Very good. Staff, anything to enlighten us in the future?
No, I do not have anything.
So back to schedule in January then,
January,
correct?
yes.
I have one comment.
Oh, you found it. Well, I'm going to get to you.
On that topic, though.
On that topic. Okay, all right, very well. On that topic.
I would suggest, and I don't know how it's practical or how it can be done, but if there were credible report, if the city has empowered the economic or the environmental committee to do certain things or to find certain things, it might be helpful to attach a reason why the artificial turf or the synthetic plants are not permitted by the code. I know in my real job, as I call it, I will make a statement as to what I'm finding, and then sometimes I say, see the case law on this topic, or see the case law that's written here. Or if we're dealing with mental health issues and I attach a piece of paper that says, this assessment includes these things, so people understand why I'm making the ruling. And since artificial turf, because I told you, I was a proponent of it in the beginning, it was behind closed doors, no big deal. And as I learned more, I changed my viewpoint on it. So perhaps if a committee or commission or a report or a national something, I don't know, could be included in the code in that section to explain to people why, A, I think it would help the people understand what the request is for and against, and B, the next time there's a variance here, we can't count on our 2 citizens to be here every single variance to make this compelling argument. And if we're going to be bound by the evidence presented that day, it may have a different outcome. And I think that would, including the code, would actually allow us to refer to that as part of the reason to deny a request when appropriate and to grant it when otherwise appropriate. That's my 2 cents. If you're telling me that city council is considering certain things, then I would encourage that.
Thank you. Counselor, have anything to enlighten us with today?
Nothing that you don't already know. We're going to miss Kristen Smith Rodriguez as one of our valued board members here. This is her last night, and we're really just going to miss you. And
it's been 10 years. I didn't know that until the dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sad.
I'm sad too. So on that sad note, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. That we're going to say Merry Christmas. All right, anybody up here have anything to say? All right, I will just say we now have a vacancy as of this meeting for a full-time member here on our board. If anybody listening or anything wants to make an application, please see the city clerk.
The clerk's office will reach out to the two alternates to see if they're interested in becoming a regular member, and that she will take that into consideration, and then the city council will evaluate that in addition to any other pending applications to fulfill the last vacancy.
Good. All right, well, let's all have a happy new year and see you next year. Woo-hoo!
Goodbye, Kristen.